All right, g'day. Welcome back to Collectivitis podcast, where we dissect the disease that is collectivism. My name's Pietro. This is Floyd. How you doing, Floyd?
What up, Pietro? Yeah, I'm good, mate. Yourself?
I'm all right. I was a little sick last week, hence why we haven't done an episode exactly on. Yeah, I'm sure it was.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I don't test. But my voice is actually quite a lot better just in the last day or so. I thought I was going to have to do a podcast paying homage to RFK and talk like this the whole time. But thankfully, no, you have most of my voice here today. Other than that, I'm good. But there's heaps to talk about, given that we haven't talked in a little while. How are you?
Yeah, every day is the same. I don't think that's a good. I don't think that's a bad thing. Maybe it's not a good thing, but yeah, it's just dealing with summer and global warming and how it's killing us all. And yeah, it's horrible.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind a bit more global warming. We were promised a much hotter summer this year, so I've been burning tires in the backyard for the last week and a half. Maybe that's why I got sick from the tire fumes.
So then maybe put some treated pine in there by mistake too.
Yeah, probably. Some microplastics. Anyway,
well, microplastics are in everything, so you can't avoid burning microplastics.
And I think they're good for you. I reckon it's a conspiracy that they're not good for you.
Yeah,
anyway. Today we wanted to talk about a few things have been happening. We'll talk a little bit Australian and we'll talk a little bit US politics, but let's start with Australian, and let's start with someone who has largely gotten away with his doings unscathed by the savage critique of Collectivitis podcast, and that's because our dear former Prime Minister Scott Morrison had actually already lost the federal election by the time that we started recording episodes. So there was never really anything to criticize him on that was contemporary. There's lots to criticize him on stuff that he's done, but we haven't really honed in on Scott Morrison before, and we're going to do that today because he has finally announced that he's going to resign from federal parliament, from the seat of Cook. He was sitting around collecting a paycheck as a backbencher, not doing much, just sort of being there, reminiscing on the good old days when he was PM, but he no longer is. And he has finally
done this so much better. I'm sure that's all that's going through his head. Oh, I could have done this so much better.
Well, he had a go. He had a shot at doing it so much better, and he was pretty awful. But he's finally resigned, and we'll play a quick clip, and let's see what he has to say for himself.
After announcing his retirement from Australian politics, Scott Morrison revealed he'd be taking up a new position in the American defence private sector alongside former key Trump figures such as Mike Pompeo. In an exclusive interview with Paul Murray last night, and his first since announcing his retirement from politics, Scott Morrison says he's enormously grateful for his time in Parliament.
Snapping a photo with a memory of his time spent with US political heavyweights, former Prime Minister Scott Morrison sat down for an exclusive interview with Sky News host Paul Murray in the Man Cave.
It's great to come here and finally be in the Man Cave.
Finally be in the Man Cave.
We've never had an interview here.
Yeah, done the White House, done everything.
We've been everywhere.
Finally the Man Cave, it's ticked off.
Here we are.
Reported first on Sky News, followed by an announcement from the member for Cook on social media, Scott Morrison revealed on Tuesday he will retire from Parliament next month, telling Paul Murray why now is the right time.
At some point, you need to make some decisions about what you're going to do longer term. And I've sort of come to that view over the last, several months, the last 6 months or so. And some great opportunities have come forward at the end of Parliament last year.
Opportunities which reportedly include new positions in the American defence private sector, alongside the likes of Trump administration Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Reflecting on his time in office and the criticism he's faced over the years, Mr Morrison believes it's simply part of the job.
You can't complain about the field you're on. You choose a life in public service in politics, and that's going to come with some slings and arrows. The key thing is, and look, my faith informs me a lot on this, is you don't carry it around with you for the rest of your life.
Throwing his full...
All right, that's what our good friend Scomo has to say for himself. I'll let you have a go at him first.
Okay, yeah. I don't know if this is him being like, well, everything's kind of eroded for me in Australia, so let me go off to America. I don't know if this is the only job he could get. I don't know if he's been barred out of anywhere else. Yeah, I mean, good on you, Scomo. Go off and fuck off. And I think this is like, wars aren't going to end anytime soon if they're looking for people. And it's certainly worse for Australia now. They've got their own Australian consultant. And yeah, I like the fact his faith is informing him he should go on and fund wars and hate and violence towards people. That's very, very
Very
geez,
evangelist of him, isn't it?
yeah, I know. It's
Well, I think it's kind of funny that he like they invoke a lot of Trump imagery there, and he takes out the picture of Trump and kind of like talks about how, because he was the PM during the time while Trump was the president of the US. But I think, like, if you think about Trump, and he talks about draining the swamp, and he still talks about it now, and he certainly talked about it then, and he didn't really do it. But there is there is nothing clearer. No one is a better example of the swamp than Scott Morrison. And this is exactly how the swamp works, right? Like, Prime Minister was pretty awful as a Prime Minister, didn't really stand for much, just kind of expanded the state as they all do. Certainly was warmongering as a PM. He was the PM under which the Russia-Ukraine war started, and immediately we went and threw billions of dollars, well, $1 billion in the end, of funds to advancing that war and continuing that war and keeping it going and ensuring that Ukrainians and Russians were dying. So certainly no problem with profiteering off war and with proliferating war. But as soon as they're out of the political realm, like, these people, they can't remain in the political realm forever. No politician can maintain their popularity in such a way forever. But what they do is they garner as much influence, they make as many friends, they earn themselves as many favors, they have as many connections as they can. And then by the time they do eventually exit politics, this is the swamp. Him going directly from a position where they regulate and where they give the contracts to these warmongering military companies, and go straight into a job working for one of these, where he can use his contacts and he can use the references he has and he can use the regulatory influence that he made to ensure that these weapons manufacturers get the contracts and get the money. So this revolving door of going straight in from an elected position where you're meant to be serving the public to this corporate, private, semi-private kind of mafia, and then helping them get their contracts. And all of this is disgusting enough as it is, without the added bonus that they're doing it by proliferating war, which, as you said very accurately, there's no shortage of war at the moment. And I think Scott Morrison is banking on that. You got to think also, like, Scott Morrison was awful. Like, he stood for nothing, was incompetent, was ham-fisted at every turn that he made, and got slaughtered by Albanese, who is almost just as bad. So he's not a competent person. No one's hiring him for his competence. The fact that he stayed in Parliament for as long as he did was suggested by a lot of people that he couldn't find a job in the private sector. That's how bad he is at working. That's how awful he is. So it's not for his competence. It's not that they love this bumbling sort of happy-go-lucky Scotty from marketing figure, and they really want him working in their ranks because, hey, this is someone we can't afford to let slip by. No, it's because of his contact. It's because of the fact that he has these connections. It's because of the fact that he can get us as a corporation a leg up with government contracts and whatnot. So, and I think that, like, that is the definition of the swamp. You could not find a clearer example of how the swamp works than this revolving door. And Scott Morrison, there you go, case in point, straight into the military-industrial complex. Not even just ours, the one between us and the US, because that alliance has never led to any wars that shouldn't have existed ever.
Yeah, and it's like, as you said, I think the opportunity for him just to get employed and stay in Australia is up there, because you think that someone would be chomping at the bit to say, I'm sure, Tony Abbott's still in Australia, isn't he?
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't have much love for Tony Abbott, but he's definitely much more competent than Scott Morrison is. So yeah, he's kind of fishing out there, and finally, it's just almost like, has he been in his office just on Seek or on LinkedIn, just trying to maximize his profile so someone will come along and headhunt him, and finally, it's happened after. Geez, how long ago was that election? What, a few years now? What, 2 years?
Year and a half.
Year and a half. So yeah, he's finally there, and it's I don't know if going into weapons manufacturing, if that's just like or defense contracting, it's like, well, this is the only place that'll get me, so I'm gonna go here, or if it's a decision like, yeah, I want to fuck people up.
I think he'll make a lot of money. Like, I think that's
For
the
sure.
thing. Like, they'll make a lot of money by having someone like him with the connections that he has, and he'll
Oh,
make
yeah.
a lot of money by being put in these in this spot. It's exactly the same thing that happened with Nikki Haley in the US. She went straight from a UN job and from governor of North Carolina or South Carolina, I can't remember which one of the two, into a weapons manufacturing defense contracting job. Because what? Because she's competent? No, because she has the connections to win the contracts now. Yeah, just disgusting. And also like the two-facedness. If you ever needed more of an example of how two-faced Scott Morrison is willing to be for his own benefit, is the fact that he is an evangelist, an evangelical Christian. Like, you know, the most fundamentalist, you know, supposed to be peace-loving Christian cohort that there is. And yet somehow that doesn't conflict with his moral conscience in the sense that he can now go and profiteer off war and proliferate war and cause death and destruction in countries halfway around the world and make money for companies that profit off death and destruction halfway around the world. That doesn't conflict with his evangelical principles, which he touts so fiercely in every other context. And even in that interview, he talks about his faith.
I think he loves his enemies so much that he doesn't want them to suffer. He wants them just to die a quick death. Maybe that's why.
That's where the evangelical Christian comes in. He said,
yeah.
those poor Middle Eastern kids, their life is suffering, and I'm going to help put them out of their misery by ensuring that there's a drone strike on top of their school and their hospital.
Do
that
unto
does make
others,
more sense.
You know, because if I was in that situation, I just want to die.
Yeah, turn the other cheek and all of that. I'm sure. Look, I'm sure in his twisted, like funny as that is, I'm sure in his twisted soul somewhere, like he has to justify it somehow. I don't know if he could justify it exactly like that, but he justifies it somehow. Or more likely is the fact that he has no faith at all and he's just two-faced and says whatever he needs to gain the influence that he does.
I think, what did Jesus say? If a defense contractor offers you a contract for 3 years, you take it for 6.
Yeah. I remember Jesus went straight from his cushy job of carpenter into defense contracting before he was executed by the CIA. Look, there's parallels. There's parallels between Scott Morrison and Jesus, and I'm sure he would see it that way as well.
I think we're seeing the rise again of Scott Morrison.
I think we will never hear about Scott Morrison again, and it's only, it's not a moment too soon. Unfortunately, the fact that we don't hear from him doesn't mean that he won't be causing harm. In fact, he'll probably cause more harm in his current position than he ever had the ability to do as PM. It's just that he had, the spotlight right on top of him and right upon him.
Well, I hope we hear from him again, because the only time we will is when he fucks up majorly and does something wrong. So that's when we'll hear from him again. So hopefully we do. Hopefully he does go and fuck something up, and it's like, oh, you're out again, Scomo. Like, this is the second dick for you to eat.
Scott Morrison fired from his third defense contracting job because even though he has all these connections, he's just too shit at working that they just have to keep getting rid of him. I think another thing that this kind of reminded me of that we never got a chance to criticize Scott Morrison on was so just how fucking two-faced and how anything he'll say to gain himself influence or to get a leg up in any way whatsoever is during the whole, well, he's known as being the controversial COVID prime minister because he was the prime minister that steered us through the majority of the COVID years. So obviously enacted all the lockdowns, quarantine facilities was all part of his jurisdiction, and closing borders and all the rest of it. As much as there were, individual states had quite a lot more power than we potentially thought prior to the COVID period, he was the one that oversaw all of it. And I just remember throughout all of it, Scotty from marketing, when there was the protests against mandates and all of that sort of stuff, he would speak against them. He would say, mandates are unconstitutional. They shouldn't be happening. They don't happen in Australia. He would lie. He would say, we don't have vaccine mandates in Australia. But, we never will. But, if there is an employer that requires a certain injection to be had to enter their workplace, then that is between the employer, completely ignoring the fact that the mandates existed in the public sector, in all of the public sector and regulated by the public sector jobs. So we did have vaccine mandates. If you worked in probably over half of the jobs that the government could dictate whether you were allowed into work or not, you did have vaccine mandates. And throughout all of that time, he, would pay lip service to the fact that we don't have mandates, we shouldn't have mandates, what they're doing is wrong, and then would not lift a finger in any other way, because it was obvious that in the polling, it was showing that it would be popular to talk against vaccine mandates to win this certain subsect of society, but also too unpopular to actually do anything about it. So Scotty from marketing, the two-faced piece of shit, as he did all the way leading up to it, and as he did all the way afterward, would try and say the thing that would win him the most favor possible to try and worm his way into some scrap of popularity without ever having the backbone to do anything, and not standing for anything either. The most nothing, useless PM of all time. At least Dan Andrews, you knew where he fucking stood. Scomo, on a whim, on a internal polling, would change his mind.
I think there's another thing when it comes to Scomo and COVID, is that he had, at least some semblance of influence to push back on what the states were doing and come out and say, well, from a federal perspective, we don't agree with this, whether it's to kind of at least do something decent or just to garner some sort of support for him. But he didn't. Maybe he was doing that in private and the states just had too much power, or the news wasn't covering it. We'll never really know, but he could have at least made some sort of effort to at least say, which obviously meant that he was behind all of this, or he supported all of it anyway, and would just go along with it because, well, it seems like it's popular. Everyone's kind of obeying it. It's not like we're all kicking back. There's only this few 100,000 people, across the states that are doing this. And it's just kind of limp-wristed, I think, Scomo.
Yeah, I don't think there was ever any doubt that the feds have always had much more power than the states in Australia, time immemorial. The first time that it was it seemed like it was more important who won the state election than the federal election was post-COVID, because it was oh, holy shit, actually, each of the states are being given the possibility to determine their own fate, and this sort of competitive federalism idea of some states having lockdowns, some states not having lockdowns. I think, but that was all done by Scott Morrison so that he had, plausible deniability, so that he could say, I never told them to lock down. I said you could or you couldn't. And therefore, if you don't like lockdowns in Victoria, that's not Scomo's fault. Hey, Scomo said you could do whatever you want. That's Dan Andrews' fault. And if you do like lockdowns in, I don't know, where didn't they do lockdowns? New South Wales for a little bit didn't do lockdowns. He could be like, well, hey, I said you guys have the choice. It's Perrottet who didn't do the lockdowns. I'm Scomo. Everybody loves Scomo. Remember me, Scomo? And if you like vaccine mandates, I didn't tell them what they can and can't do. I said Dan Andrews could keep his vaccine mandate. And if you don't remember when I said I don't like him either? Scomo. Yeah, Scomo. Everybody loves Scomo. And in the end, nobody fucking loved Scomo. Everyone fucking hated Scomo and hopefully hates him forever.
Yeah, well, that or he's just considered the dud prime minister of it all.
I don't know if you remember. Do you remember there's the Simpsons episode where I can't remember exactly how it happens, but Milhouse is the dud. It's some board game they're playing, and there's this dud card that looks exactly like Milhouse, and Bart's
you
really
got
upset.
The dud.
And I don't know, Milhouse, with the glasses and the sort of short chubby kind of loser look about him. Not very physically, but it reminds me a bit of Scott Morrison. Maybe he is the dud prime minister.
Well,
So
because
there
you can always think back on prime ministers and be like, well, what did they do? I mean, if you have a good think about it, Scott Morrison's always going to be remembered by COVID. I think like a lot of these people are, and it's just going to be generic COVID because everyone's going to, especially I think Victorians, whether you like him or hate him, they're going to remember Dan Andrews more than Scomo.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh yeah, that guy. Oh yeah, he was prime minister. Yeah.
See, ScoMo's legacy, I don't even think is that important. Like, I don't think he will even be remembered for COVID. I think you're right. I think people like Dan Andrews and, you know, your Perrottets and Berejiklians and Palaszczys are going to be remembered more for COVID than Scomo. Scomo will be remembered for going to on holiday to Hawaii when there were the bushfires. And for just like the who was it, Grace Tame that didn't shake his hand or whatever, like these sort of ham-fisted gaffes where he thought he was kind of like the coolest guy in the world, and sort of he acted the way that sort of water off a duck's back, that nothing could touch him the way that Dan would, but he just no one cared or took him seriously or liked him or whatever. Just a very unserious prime minister who clearly very enamored with himself and his position.
And didn't he inherit the head of the Liberals just by it was just by chance? It was just like, oh fuck, we've got a leadership crisis. Who do we put? Scomo, he's pretty senior. Let's just put him in.
Well, I don't know. It could I don't know, so I could be speaking out of turn. I know, for example, that when Dan Andrews won the election to become the Victorian Premier, he was not meant to win. Like, the Liberals were supposed to overwhelmingly win, but it was his faction's turn to have someone contest for the Premier. And so when he won by surprise, it was kind of like, oh shit, you know, the right faction was meant to win the next winnable election, and he had, just because of factional stuff, he had to get his turn, and then he won, and then he just never lost. That may have been something similar that happened in the Liberals, like whatever faction Scomo was a part of or whatever. It was his turn, but he was never supposed to win. Because if you remember the first one in 2019, he was not supposed to win. Bill Shorten was overwhelmingly favored. In fact, they said that Bill Shorten lost the unlosable election, and it was all a surprise that the Libs got in the first place. So potentially there was something about that, that, you know, something like that had meant that was why he was in the position in the first place, like never supposed to actually become prime minister, which I would believe. But you know, in his own words, I believe in miracles. So, and that was very much the fact that he got in the first place was very much a miracle. I think he didn't perform very many miracles since, but
no, he will turn parts of the Middle East into rubble, though.
Yes, flatten the Middle East. That can be his legacy, and he's still got time to do that. He's still got plenty of time to flatten the Middle East and even Eastern Europe if he tries really hard. I'm sure he can still get in on that one.
Africa,
and who knows?
Sure,
who knows what war they can dream up next? I mean, it's the world is your oyster when it comes to defense contracting. You can... But anyway, let's move on from Scomo. We've talked enough about him, and as you said,
Scomo wouldn't want to fucking be a Scomo.
The dud prime minister, forever the dud prime minister who's become the evangelical warlord. Let's talk though about someone much more interesting than Scomo, and something much more interesting than Scomo, which is the US primaries that are going on at the moment. And just a couple of days ago, we had the New Hampshire primary, in which Trump, as he was predicted and projected to do so, beat out Nikki Haley for New Hampshire, which was supposed to be the state where Nikki Haley had the best chance of winning something. The governor had endorsed her there. She had a whole bunch of other things going in her favor. Apparently, there was a whole heap of Democrats, so non-Republican registered people who came in force to vote for Nikki Haley just because, you know, never Trump and all this stuff. And even with all of that in her favor, I think she lost by about 9 or 10 points to Donald Trump. Now, that in and of itself is not particularly interesting. It's good because fuck Nikki Haley. She is, you know, she's probably going to be shaking hands with Scott Morrison within the next 12 hours. So they're part and parcel, that exact same sort of seen. She's worse because she has more influence. She's that return to the whole Bush Cheney era of Republican warmongering. But what's interesting is that now that she, unless there's a huge surprise and she wins somewhere else, there is really no one left other than Trump in these Republican primaries. DeSantis has dropped out. Vivek Ramaswamy dropped out and endorsed Trump.
Unfortunately.
Chris Christie dropped out. Yeah, well, unfortunately or fortunately for him, when we had Spike Cohen on the show, he said that from the start, Vivek was only ever campaigning to be Trump's vice president.
Okay.
And never has this looked more true than right now when, the moment he drops out, he's straight on the campaign trail with Trump and talking with Trump at speeches and whatnot. So, look, if that was his goal, it seems that he may well have achieved it. The problem with someone like Vivek dropping out is that, now that it looks like it's just Trump, there's only Trump, the Democrat establishment and, the fucking three-letter agencies in the US and all of the people who are persecuting Trump at the moment have made it clear that Trump is not acceptable, that Trump is, we can't have Trump. We are going to throw anything we can to make sure that it's not Trump. And these are very powerful agencies, very powerful institutions, very powerful people. So what's super interesting about all of this is that now it's like, if something drastic doesn't happen, Trump will be the Republican nominee. But it is also equally very likely, and lots of the best pundits that I listen to, and I'm sure you listen to, are saying that something will happen to Trump, whether it's they arrest him, whether they throw him in jail, whether they go so far as to assassinate him or whatever it is. That, it seems that Trump is so unacceptable that he will not be allowed to run. And now there is no one else. Now there is no one else on the Republican side, certainly. On the Democrat side, if it's Biden, Trump beats Biden at the next election. I don't know what you think, but I think that there's no way that in a fair election, and there's always that avenue that it could be cheating in some way or another, but in a fair election, how can anyone think that Biden's going to beat Trump? He scraped in last time, and since then Biden is way less popular and Trump is way more popular. So there's this whole scenario that's played out is essentially, the finish line is in sight. Trump is the only one in the race, unless Biden is replaced with, your Michelle Obama or Gavin Newsom or someone more palatable.
Well, Hillary.
But it's just Trump running towards the
I want to
finish line.
Trump Hillary 2.0 again.
It could be Hillary. Yeah, it could be Hillary. That would be entertaining. But at the moment, it's just Trump racing by himself towards this finish line. Joe Biden has already fallen over. He's on the side, having a seizure or whatever he's doing, eating some ice cream. And if someone doesn't take Trump out, it will be Trump, and everything that means. And so it's a very, very delicately poised, very interesting scenario that the US finds itself in. And it's the first time that it's kind of like Trump is so clearly the Republican chosen candidate, and Biden is the incumbent president. So he's the Democrat chosen candidate. And yet it's like a roll of the die whether they're actually going to be the candidates running. Yeah. Never before in the history of US politics has that been the case, where the clear front runner on each side is potentially not going to be the candidate. It's the most unnormal, unnatural election that there's ever been. Anyway, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I do think Trump's got that line for candidacy, and as you said, unless something happens. As for winning, I wouldn't be surprised if he won. I guess you've got people like RFK, and I think the big thing they're saying with him is whether he eats into the right or eats into the left. So is he going to take from the Democrats? Is he going to take from the Republicans? We don't even know what he's going to be doing. I mean, he could get bloody 2%. For all we know, and they might not be people that, because I think as Australians, I know what I forget is that you don't have to vote. It's not mandatory to vote there. So I guess it's the whole idea of who actually comes out to vote. But yeah, if I put a bet on, it would be for Trump to win the presidency if it was him and Biden. If they brought out someone else, I don't know. That would kind of affect the odds for it. And yeah, they're going to have to do something to stop the Trump train, because he's just going to do what he did last time, you know, dance to the village people and get out there. And he's got a bigger army than he did last time of people who just love him, and people on top of that who have seen what's happened to America under Biden, just being like, well, we may as well do this because at least it's going to be, you know, we know what the 4 years of Trump are like, and that's probably better.
Yeah, well, I think so. Kind of 2 points to that. The first being that on RFK, I think what RFK shows us more interesting than anything else. I think RFK will do much better than 2%. I think he'll be like 10, 15, anywhere from 10 to 20%. And you're right. Does he eat more into the right or more into the left? But he was running to be a Democrat candidate.
Yeah.
And what he showed us was that the Democratic establishment is not democratic in the slightest. Like, they choose. Whoever's at the top, whoever's making the decisions for them, chooses who the candidate will be. We already knew this kind of when Bernie Sanders got twice thrown under the bus to allow first Hillary and then Biden to be the candidate, even though he was surging in popularity then. But, you know, the fact that they brought in some rules, some archaic rules, or changed the rules or whatever, so that RFK couldn't possibly win.
Yeah.
And that was the moment RFK said, all right, I'll go be an independent. So it shows that on the Democratic side, they're going to pick. And whether it's Biden or not is not dependent on some primaries or whatever happens. It's going to be on, at some point, will they find a good excuse to get rid of him? Or do they think, hey, this corpse of a man can actually maybe win us something?
Yeah, can we I don't know if you're familiar with Warhammer 40K. Can they turn him into the Emperor?
I'm not familiar, but is that
Okay.
so? Is that
Well,
what is the Emperor in that?
People that know 40K will know this. Essentially, the Emperor is like their head of the empire, but he's not actually alive. He's just fed through like these. He sits on a throne with like artificial machinery propping him alive. Yeah, pretty much. That's TLDR.
But that as an analogy, that is perfect, because that's exactly what they want from their head. They don't want someone who is actually a person, who is actually has thoughts and agendas and views and ideas. Even, you know, your Ocasio-Cortez and all of that, like, as odious as they are to us libertarians, like, they're just as odious to the Democrat establishment, because they can't be controlled in the way that, you know, someone like Biden could be. And then, you know, someone like Biden is essentially just a mouthpiece for the donor class and for all the corporate interests and all the people who actually pull the levers for the Democratic establishment, and not a very good mouthpiece either. But that doesn't matter. Who was that? I forget the name of that. The senator that passed away last year, who was like 90 something years old. Like that she was literally just like a sitting corpse. Now, there's a reason that they have these archaic, ancient people as senators and in these higher positions of power. It's because, you know, the older and more senile you are, the less you're an actual person, and the more you are this emperor figure that they can control and manipulate, and all the rest of it. So, yeah, I mean, that's I think that as far as analogies go, that's perfect. I had a video.
I'll send you a link to the 40K wiki so you can have a look at it afterwards.
Perfect. And for any of our interested viewers, you can have a look at that as well. I've got a video of Trump. Let's play that. Let's see what Trump says after the New Hampshire win that he just had.
Well, I want to thank everybody. This is a fantastic state. This is a great, great state. You know, we won New Hampshire 3 times now. Three. We win it every time. We win the primary. We win the generals. We've won it, and it's a very, very special place to me. It's very important. If you remember, in 2016, we came here and we needed that win, and we won by 21 points, and it was great. And today, I have to tell you, it was very interesting, because I said, wow, what a great victory. But then somebody ran up to the stage all dressed up nicely when it was at 7. But now I just walked up and it's at 14. But she ran up when it was 7. And, you know, we have to do what's good for our party. And she was up, and I said, wow, she's doing like a speech like she won. She didn't win, she lost. And, you know, last week we had a little bit of a problem, and if you remember, Ron was very upset because she ran up and she pretended she won Iowa. And I looked around, I said, didn't she come in third? Yeah, she came in third. And then I looked at the polls. She was talking about most winnability, who's going to win, and I had one put up. I don't know if you see it, but I have one put up. We've won almost every single poll in the last 3 months against crooked Joe Biden, almost every poll. And she doesn't win those polls.
All right, so that's Trump having a dig at Nikki Haley, for anyone who was wondering who he's talking about there in that section. Nikki Haley claiming that she'd won both this one, which she lost, and the Iowa caucus, which she came in third to DeSantis, but claiming them all as victories, the way that she talks. I think, look, a few things that I think are interesting. Number one, Trump thrives in this environment. Trump is much better at being a candidate for president than he was at being president, because it's just like off the cuff stand-up comedy of the purest form, and it's just so nice. And when he picks on someone that you also hate, it just feels like being in a warm embrace. Like, oh yeah, go get her, go talk shit about Nikki. Oh yeah, you do that, Trump. Fucking tell me how bad Nikki Haley is. That's perfect. Now, obviously, sometimes he'll throw daggers. He threw daggers at Vivek Ramaswamy just before Ramaswamy dropped out, and you kind of think, oh no, that's my guy, Trump. Don't talk about my guy. But when he's talking about someone that you also hate, it's just beautiful. And clearly, the other thing that to note is that everything they're throwing at him, every time they throw an arrest at him or throw another, whatever it may be, accusation, another court date, he gets more popular from it. There's no stopping, as you said, the Trump train. And I think large part of it is because the more they throw against him, the more that middle section of America who can see that the government and the establishment and the state is not on their side, the more Trump is portrayed as the enemy of the state, the more they think, okay, well then maybe that's my guy. And it's a correct instinct. It's not necessarily correct. I don't think Trump has any intention of diminishing the size of the state in any serious way. I mean, I know now he talks about getting his revenge on, the three-letter agencies and appointing better people and taking out anyone who has hampered him and tried to arrest him. And there is that hope there that he will try and, throw a dagger into the state at the moment through nothing more than just like, personal vengeance. But that instinct of, hey, this is the enemy of the state, like that is correct for people. And I think his popularity rising every time they throw something at him shows that middle America is rejecting the state, which is positive.
Yeah, and I don't know what they haven't got yet is that he's the rebel with a cause. And the more you do that, I think especially the way how Americans are portrayed, they're generally portrayed as rebels. And how do you not love that? I mean, if there was an Australian politician doing that, it'd just be like, yeah, man, this dude's great, because you naturally just want to go with that person. It's like the establishment hates you, but people like you. So what does that tell you? Yeah, well, just you stand by them just because it's almost like that idea of like coolness. It's like, wow, this dude's cool. Like there's no real, you're not analyzing. You're just going off this emotional feeling that it's just like, wow, all right, this guy's my guy.
Well, yeah, it's that whole, and I think this is part of the appeal of Trump, is that he doesn't stand for policies in overarching senses. Like he's very difficult to place in, for example, like the political compass. Where exactly does he sit on this? He has a couple of real big things that he'll talk about. Build the wall was the last time, and this time he's talking a lot about immigration and that sort of thing. But in terms of his actual views, he's very difficult to pin down. It's all these vague kind of eccentricities and vague but grandiose ideas, like, hey, I'm against everything that is against you. And that, because of that, you're right. Like it's this idea of the rebel with a cause, but because it's so vague, everyone can apply what they want to see in Trump within Trump. Libertarians can apply, hey, he wants to get rid of the 3-letter agencies. He wants to get rid of he hates the state. He hates all these, these powers that be. He's talking against, the war in Ukraine and against proliferating wars and all of this. And because he's such a blank canvas and it's kind of mysterious what he's actually going to do, anyone can apply what they see as the thing that needs to happen to Trump. So yeah, he's become the lightning rod for anyone's ideas. And it's like in movies, I think it's called the Mary Sue. Is that right? The character that is kind of like the main character, the protagonist in movies and books, that is so like nondescript and vague that if you're reading the book or if you're watching the film, you can put yourself in their shoes really easily because there's nothing distinctive about them. Now, Trump obviously is very distinctive in his personality, but in terms of his views, you can put yourself in his shoes and imagine yourself as Trump and the things that he says, because he takes both sides of issues often. He'll take one side on one day and take the other side on another day. You can just listen to the stuff that you like and apply that image of Trump in your head, and therefore you are a Trumper.
Not a Mary Sue. Trump is like the opposite of a Mary Sue, because the Mary Sue's everything good happens to the Mary Sue. They have no kind of my understanding is that they always just get through and everything always goes their way.
Right. Okay.
But I mean, that could be because, this guy gets thrown all this crap and he just comes through relatively unscathed. Like, dude's not in prison yet. I mean, he's been indicted and stuff, but I mean, he's still got his money. Still got his status. So
well, and I mean, how long has he got left on this planet? He's got 10 years at most.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
What's he gonna what could he possibly spend the billions of dollars that he has left on that would bring him anywhere near as much joy as, the adulation of the people that he has now? Like, I mean, Trump was a popular figure before running for president, but it wasn't like he wasn't loved. He wasn't beloved. He was popular because everyone kind of liked him and he was a celebrity and he encapsulated that whole celebrity status persona.
Yeah.
Now
he's a bit eccentric, so, this guy's funny.
Yeah, exactly. And he was in Home Alone 2 and all of that shit. But like now he's, half of the country thinks he's Satan and half of it thinks he's Jesus. And I mean, that's probably worth more to him than any of the money that he has left.
Yeah.
Like I don't think there's any way he can spend it in any way that'll bring him more joy than to be Jesus for half of the country.
And rather than being a footnote in history, he's going to be an entire chapter in the book.
Oh yeah, there's the Encyclopedia of History. They have to add a new T just for book just for Trump.
He's going to be up there with all the remembered. He's going to be up there with JFK and Abraham Lincoln and Washington and stuff, just because of how divisive he's been. So yeah, he's won already.
He's won the game of life, and now we just need to see if they let him live on to win the presidency as well. That's the real question. I think we're about at time there. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about before we head off?
Not really. I mean, if we're at time, that's all good. So yeah, I mean, we'll see how everything goes for the presidency. The Republican nomination, what they kind of throw at Trump, and how it all goes. But I mean, as you said, I don't think we can see anyone else being the Republican candidate at this stage. Unless something bad happens to him, and we'll see what happens with the Democrats. I'm sure we're going to be doing multiple episodes about this in the future, so we'll talk about it then.
We'll call it now. Do they let Trump run? Is Trump going to be the Republican candidate that goes up at the actual presidential election? Do you think yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
What about you?
Like, I hope it's yes, but I actually think, look, a lot of the Dave Smith's part of the problem. Very much a fan of that show. A lot of other sort of similar vein people of that view, that idea there, don't think it'll end up being Trump.
Okay.
They don't think that, and so I don't know. The thing is, I don't know. I hope it's a yes, but if I had to gamble on it right now, I'd probably say no. And it's hard to imagine it because something enormous has to happen. Like, you sort of imagine this, we have status quo bias. We just assume that things are going to carry on the way they are. But the signals that have been given by the powers that be that Trump is completely unacceptable, I think something huge and controversial is going to happen, and Trump won't be allowed. And that could cause also, and like after that point there, it's anyone's guess whether there's a fucking civil war or whether there's World War III. You know, like after that point there, who knows? But I don't know. I think this is going to be a year for the history books. They might need a 2024 book in the encyclopedia of everything just for what happens this year.
And we'll be here to cover it all, so don't forget to subscribe.
Exactly. We are, although we are military age male, so potentially if there is World War III, we might get conscripted. But other than that, we'll do shows on the road if that's what happens. So we'll see you from war-torn Gaza if we get conscripted. If not, we'll see you from right here. All right. Don't forget to like, subscribe on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and Spotify. Other than that, peace.
Well.